What if the thing you think is holding you back isn't what you think it is? You say self-sabotage doesn't even exist.
Nobody wants to be the bad guy, even especially in their own story. And if you are self-sabotaging, you become the villain. So then the question is, so how do you become the hero of that?
Phil went somewhere in this conversation I wasn't expecting, and it opened many thoughts and reflections about myself.
I had built the story or the narrative that I needed to fulfill my potential in order to be loved by my mum. And when I got to an age where I learned that that wasn't true.
The honesty and coming back to the untold truths, the lies within us, it must be one of the most challenging things that we can do as a human being.
You're not procrastinating the action, you end up procrastinating the desire. You go through life thinking, I don't want anything.
And that's a lie. Phil, thank you for being here. So many coaches and in the personal development world, we hear self-sabotage as being a problem. Wow, I keep sabotaging myself. You take a different approach. You say self-sabotage doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Tell me, what does that mean?
For me, I think as soon as we give something a label, you're fulfilling the excuse. Most of the time, the way we talk about ourselves to ourselves will dictate the action we take as a result. So things like self-sabotage, it's another diagnosis. And so it gives people something to fall back on and using it as an excuse or a reason to not take action. When they say things like, yeah, I want to do this, but I keep self-sabotaging. And there's a full stop at the end of that sentence. And it's just like, that's the outcome, that's the result. And then it leads into that victimhood approach. I suffer from self-sabotage. I have self-sabotage. I do self-sabotage. And there's no continuation of that. Whereas if you actually look at the actions that are taken as a result of supposed self-sabotage, you realize that those actions themselves have purpose. You're doing them for a reason. It's not because your subconscious is like out to get you and doesn't want you to succeed. It's because of something else, be it fear, a repeated habit that you've formed over the years coming into play. And then when you do something that seems like a self-sabotage approach, you're actually just protecting yourself or fulfilling an alternative purpose that maybe you're not consciously aware of. Whether that purpose is to protect yourself or to fulfill another need. Because that's the other thing. We can be really conscious of a desire. You know the thing that you want, but you might not be aware that that desire is in conflict of another need. And usually that need is linked to some kind of survival. You know, people fear speaking on stage because they're afraid of being judged, because they're afraid of being rejected. And it's in our DNA that from a survival instinct, we don't want that. But then if the thing that you want is to speak on stage and it directly conflicts with that need to survive, you'll self-sabotage.
I hear that answer to be quite similar to the same pattern that we see play out in procrastination or any kind of avoidance patterns, because it's in conflict with what it is that we want. When it comes to self-sabotage specifically, I guess that's highlighted in a way that it's like we're taking actions that are in direct reverse of what's going to give us the outcome that it is that we want.
Yeah.
And so can you give us some examples of how you say that play out with the people that you work with so we can get a bit more of a tangible understanding of how we could then approach that?
It's called self-sabotage, right? Nobody wants to be the bad guy, even especially in their own story. And if you are self-sabotaging, you become the villain. So then the question is, so how do you become the hero of that? What does the hero even look like? And ultimately, it requires self-honesty. If you can't admit to yourself that you are the one doing the action that's preventing you from getting what you want, again, you'll enter that victim mentality of blaming other people, other things, circumstance, and then you won't be able to have the power to do anything about it. Whereas if you have the courage to admit, I'm the one that's doing these things, I'm the one that's taking the action that's preventing me getting the thing that I want, it hurts, and it can be really frustrating, because then you're like, well, yeah, why am I doing this to myself? But in doing so, you empower yourself to make that change. So I'm trying to think of an example. Well, let's link it back to relationships. So a relationship is made up of two people. And if you get into an argument, you could take the approach of fighting your corner, stating what your point is, and explaining it to the point where it's irrefutable. The other person can't argue. And then the conclusion is that you're right, and you win. But then if your goal was to fix the relationship, for the relationship to be good, you haven't achieved the outcome. You yourself have won, but the relationship is not good. That happens within the self, because you've got the front-facing consciousness, which wants to achieve the goal, and then you've got the subconscious protector, which is ensuring that you continue living by any means necessary. And if those two are in conflict, you can get into an argument, fight your point, and maybe you'll win. But if that ultimately ends, like, this is an extreme example, but if that ultimately ends up in that subconscious protector losing, you may end up in a situation that's very dangerous and doing something that causes you harm, even though you won the argument. But then if the front-facing consciousness is defeated, the good news is you survive another day, but you feel like a great loss. And then that does make you feel good moving forward, taking action.
Great analogy. I'm imagining, I'm visualizing those internal parts of myself, and I really feel that. I think a lot of these self-sabotage, or the protective parts of us, or the parts that want to be right. The saying that was coming up in my mind was like, you can either be right or you can be happy. You can be right or you can be successful, or and this is especially true in relationships as well. You can be in it alone and have a really unsuccessful relationship, or you can win together, and it might not always being feeling right.
Yeah.
I think coming back to those protective parts of ourselves, or as we like to call it, the ego. I think the ego's got a really tough job in keeping us safe, which is often safety is righteousness and everything that comes with it. It's a really tough job, because really it's holding us back in the context of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I heard you talk about there is like it relates back to that saying of like, with a big enough why, you can take care of any how.
Yeah.
Has that been true in your experience? Is that the only thing that's holding people back? People just don't have a grandiose enough why, and that's why they're holding themselves back and they can't figure out the how, or is there more to it than that?
It's not about the size of the why, it's about the strength of the connection that you have to it. Because take my mum, for example, her why was her children, which, depending on who you speak to, that's a massive why, and to others it's not. So it's not about the subject itself, but for her, the strength of that purpose was strong enough for her to do whatever she needed to do in order to provide, in order to protect, in order to love. So you can come up with this super grandiose reason why you want to do the thing that you want to do, but if you don't feel the strength of that bond to it, then you've just got a massive paragraph of why you should want it. And in the times when things get tough and you try and lean back on it, you won't be supported by the size of that why. You'll be supported by the strength of the bond to it. You can have like a really small, I mean, in some cases, just because you want it is a strong enough why. And if people really want it, it's so strong that they become unstoppable. The only real risk in that situation is we're humans can be quite fickle. and you can wake up one day and just not want it anymore. And if you've built everything you've done on just the desire to, because you want it, and then you don't have that anymore, you've got nothing else to fall back on.
Mm. Mm. I think the reverse can also be true, right? When we talk about whether it is self-sabotage or procrastination or avoidance or whatever the problem is, one of the things that we say in coaching is it's not actually a problem, it's a solution.
Yeah.
It's a solution to, like what you mentioned, the fears or the discomfort or whatever it is that we've been avoiding, which is super challenging to face, by the way. Like you're talking about the honesty. I think the honesty in coming, and I say this all the time, is the honesty and coming back to the untold truths or the lies or whatever it is within us is must be one of the most challenging things that we can do as a human being. And so when we talk about big enough why, it's either, and maybe it's subconsciously and we don't understand it yet, and maybe this is where you can come in, you can share your thoughts on this, is a big enough why of why we shouldn't do it versus the big enough why of why we should do it being in conflict. And maybe the why of why we shouldn't do it, is that what's coming out as a self-sabotage or a procrastination or, as the solution, protecting ourselves from taking that action?
Well, because there is a why for both sides.
Mm,
If you're taking an action that's going against your desire, you got to be able to ask why you're taking the action, because we very rarely take action for no reason, even if the action we're taking isn't the one we want.
mm,
That action has purpose, it has a reason. It might be to protect, it might be to fulfill another need. And it takes a great deal of self-honesty. This time last year, I was looking into self-honesty so much, and being able to just constantly question the self. And it gets really difficult
mm,
because, like I said, we never want to be the bad guy. We never want to be the villain. And so if you end up in a situation where you have this goal or desire, but you're just constantly taking actions that aren't in alignment with it, you have to admit to yourself that you're the one messing up. You're the one that's veering this train onto a different track. But you're the driver.
mm,
Right? You can't keep blaming other stuff and other things. And sometimes that's really triggering for people. And because they do blame so much on their circumstance, and they say, like, oh, Phil, you don't understand. Like, I've got this really controlling partner, or my job doesn't let me, take much initiative because they're so set in their ways, and every time I try and change something, I get shut down. And it's like, okay, so you're aware of these limitations, but you haven't fully explored your options. And if you are truly in a situation where you're effectively imprisoned, I mean, even people in prison, they're in prison, right? They're locked away. But I'm thinking, my mind casts back to Viktor Frankl, and man's search for meaning. And it's like, two people can experience the exact same thing and have a completely different experience of it. And in terms of being imprisoned, either physically or mentally, our perception, the meaning that we build around what's happening, impacts the possibility and the options that you have before you even take action. And so the person who's got the mentality of, this is a difficult situation, but I'll figure it out, has way more options than the person of, this is a difficult situation and there's nothing I can do.
mm.
So it really just, it starts with the narrative that you build around the situation before you can even do anything about it.
If you're finding value in this story, I'd love to invite you to hit the subscribe button below. You'll be the first to receive content just like this, honest, relevant, and here to support you on your journey. With every like and every follow, together we're succeeding in our mission and reconnecting the world with what matters most. And that is, of course, each other. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really love that approach of taking responsibility and ownership for where it is that we're at, our challenges, how it is that we're showing up. I think it takes a much more empowered mindset. If we switch across to responsibility, that the belief is, well, it's all on me.
Yeah.
That's a lot. If somebody has never had great results or had a sense of empowerment or has been disempowered a lot of their lives, to hear that, that sounds like, well, so what? I'm to blame. I'm to blame for everything that's happening in my life.
Blame's such a dirty word.
It really is. I think it really is. Maybe I don't think anyone's to blame per se,
No.
but we do need to take responsibility for how it is that we're going to respond next.
Yeah.
It's response able, right? Able to respond. So I imagine that's probably some of, or maybe a big part of the chunk of the work that you do, or maybe you're just working with people that are already taking that responsibility. Where would you start with someone? So if somebody's coming in with, say, a self-sabotage problem, you tell them, well, self-sabotage doesn't exist. That already shifts their mindset, and they're like, oh, oh shit, okay, this is a different approach. What typically are the steps that you go from like that level surface problem into the depths of helping them realize, ah, this is me. I'm not the villain. I'm not to blame. Here, I can take responsibility for the change that then elicits that change, and they can go away and take action.
In terms of creating change, the three-step formula is awareness, understanding, and presence.
Mhm.
That's the reoccurring thing I see in personal development. So in terms of the beginning of that conversation, I wouldn't necessarily tell someone that self-sabotage doesn't exist, because like I said before, the language we use is very important. And if I've just started working with someone, I need to learn their language. So if they're using words like self-sabotage, and I come in and say, well, self-sabotage doesn't exist, so I'm going to use this. It's like coming into this conversation, you start speaking English, and then me saying, well, like English, it isn't real, so I'm going to speak Spanish. Yeah, and if you don't speak Spanish, then this conversation isn't going to get very far. So with the first step being awareness, I would still use self-sabotage if that's the language that they're using, but the focus would be on becoming aware of the purpose of that self-sabotage. And with that, sometimes that can be enough. And suddenly you realize, oh, the reason that I keep eating cookies even though I want to lose weight is because my the majority of my happiness is derived from the intake of food. And I'm scared that if I remove that source of enjoyment, I won't have anything positive in my life. But then how often do we look at something so deeply that we can come up with a conclusion like that? Because most times it's just like, oh no, I have cookies because I like them. They taste good. So yeah, sometimes awareness is enough to change that. But then to get to a conclusion like that, you need that understanding, and you need to constantly, you're asking why this? Why does that happen? Okay, well, what does that get you? And you develop this understanding of, we like to think that we're more complicated than we are, when actually human beings are really simple. We're basic animals at the end of the day. We've just created a lot more words to describe how we think and how we feel. And we try and come up with these reasons to justify existence and being, when really it's just we're animals trying to survive, and we've got enough processing power to try and fulfill multiple needs at the same time, and sometimes those needs conflict. So once you've got that awareness and that understanding, then you can be present and to take action to actually create the change, if it hasn't happened automatically by changing the first two. Because sometimes it's enough to know something and understand it, but your being won't fully accept that new truth until you take a physical action on it. And when you make that decision, it's still in your head, and that path that you're on can still so easily shift if you take an alternative action. Whereas if you then take an action that aligns with the new awareness and understanding that you have, it's like, now it's concrete. And then we do that again, and then that's how we form habits. And now you've got this whole new textbook to refer to whenever you're in that situation or trying to achieve that thing. You're not questioning, like, is this going to work? If I do that, will it be successful? You've got this bank of evidence and resources to be like, I've done this before, this works. And so anytime I want to get that, that's what I do.
Yeah. I like that you refer to humans creating lots of language and story around our experience. That's if I ever get coaching, I need to tell, or when I get coaching, I need to tell my coach, just tell me to cut the story because I can talk my way through any challenge and protect myself in such an amazing way.
Yeah.
But that's also how I coach my clients because I know it. I can see through it in someone else. I can't see it through. I can't see my own story in the way that it's protecting me. A little bit better now, but I'm wondering, this work. You say, humans are simple. If we're so simple, well, we'd be able to self-diagnose or self-help ourselves. Do you think, like, there's limitations to the way that we can do this work for ourselves, or does it get to a point where we have to have external help, whether it's from a coach or a therapist or a counselor or a friend or someone that helps us break through our own limitations?
It depends how well you can hear your own narrative.
Mm.
Like I didn't when I was living in China and doing 2 hours of meditation Monday to Friday, I was doing it because that's what I was told to do. That was part of the program that I was in. What I didn't realize was happening was I was developing an awareness of the self. And so now, well, now it feels natural because I've been doing it for years. But when I speak about it to people, sometimes they can't comprehend that I have my inner monologue here, but then my consciousness is here,
Mm.
like watching and listening to the narrative. And then sometimes that watcher will intervene. I'll have like an impulsive thought, and then it's almost like the second voice pops in and is like damn Phil, what's that about?
Mm.
So the better you've got the awareness of that narrative, I'll use the analogy of watching a film. If you're just sitting in the audience watching the film, taking the film in, then all you've got is this movie that's playing. If you are the person in the projector room, you can see the film playing, but you can also see the audience.
Mm.
How the audience react is the action you take, or it's the thoughts that happen as a result of the stimulus of the thing that's happening in life. The person in the projector room can see the reaction of the audience, and then they can make changes accordingly. So if the film is getting a bit dark and they notice that the audience is like squinting or like having to lean in, struggling to see, and the audience member won't do anything about that because their reaction is squinting and leaning forward. The person in the projector room says, oh, they seem to be like struggling to see, let me make some changes in the projector, and then that changes the movie. Because ultimately we're trying to change the movie. The person in the audience is just changing themselves and having no impact on the movie. So you need that second level of awareness. So to answer your question about how much can we do this work ourselves, we can do it a lot, but it takes a lot more work to develop that second viewpoint. Whereas if you were to work with a coach or a counselor or anyone else, you're inviting that second viewpoint in that hasn't got the stories that you're constantly telling yourself, that hasn't got the filters that you've developed over the years, and can give you that outside perspective to make you think, oh yeah, I was only watching the movie, but you've actually seen me and the movie.
I love that analogy. It's such a great analogy. Analogy. I've never heard that one before, and it's so true. The practice that it takes to really develop that second viewpoint. I honestly believe that's a consistent practice, a constant practice until the end of time,
Yeah.
because our stories sometimes feel so true.
Yeah.
Well, they probably always feel so true until we find a different perspective and we tell a different story. This came up a little while ago now, but when it really stood out to me about a year ago, I was talking about how the constant narrative that I had was I don't have a big enough audience. Why am I not successful? Because I don't have enough audience. I need to build a bigger audience. And so I went on this mission. Why don't I have a big enough audience? Because I need to get my messaging, my avatar, and my positioning correct first. So I went on this mission to do that. And so I dialed that in and I was like, why don't I have a big enough audience? I don't have a big enough audience. And I was riding my motorbike and it was here in Bali actually. And I pulled up to an intersection and I was like, yeah, it's because I don't have a big enough audience. And this voice out of nowhere, I don't know, it was like out of the back of my mind, just came forward into the front of my mind and said, bullshit. And I was like, what? Where'd you come from? It's like, and then it said, bullshit, you can't use that excuse anymore. Like we built Give It All, which, we have a event here in Bali that you've been to, you've spoken at. There's between 50 and 70 people that attend all the time. I've got coaching programs and I've got like reasonable online presence compared to what I used to have now on Instagram and social media. And we've got this podcast. And I was like, fuck, I can't hide behind the story anymore. But like that voice wasn't always there. It's taken years to develop that voice. And so that interrupted the thought pattern to go, okay, well, if that's bullshit, what might be the new story? What might be the new truth?
Yeah.
But I didn't know the answer to that either. So I still had to go and work with a coach to go, all right, well, what new story can I write? And that was really helpful as well.
Well, the thing I want to point out there, though, is that you said you couldn't hide behind it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's, if self-sabotage is a thing, that's exactly what it is. It's hiding. Once we have a story or a narrative that keeps us safe, it's for the I was going to say for the ego, but it's not even necessarily for the ego, but it's like your alarm going off on a cold morning and your bed's really warm and you've got the option of staying in bed, and it's like, oh yeah, this is really nice, I'm just going to stay here. Now I've got this story that becomes my reason for not succeeding. That means I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take any kind of action to change this now, because even if in the long term, I don't want to stay in bed all day because things need to be done, but right now in this moment, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it's all about. It's about staying safe.
So just putting it off a little bit longer.
Yeah.
While we can stay warm in the bed. That lands with me. I like a nice warm bed in a cold environment.
Yeah. But then eventually you're going to get hungry, or you're going to need to go to the toilet. And then you enter the battle of needs. And until one of those needs becomes greater than your need to be warm and snug in your bed, you won't do anything. But then when one of those needs does, when you get like desperate for the toilet, you'll throw that cover off and you'll dart for the bathroom, and you'll completely change the environment. You'll completely change the situation. And it's like, how often do we hear these rags to riches stories where people lose it all and they hit rock bottom? And it sounds great because you think, wow, like you were homeless and poor, and you'd lost all your relationships, and somehow you built it back up and created this like amazing life that you've got now, which is great because not everyone does that. But then that in itself becomes a narrative of necessity. It's like, wait, so it's almost like the only way to reach these higher heights is to hit that rock bottom and bounce, because really when you get to that bottom, you've got nothing else to lose. But going back to the analogy, when you hit rock bottom, your need to do something or to take the action that you need to take to get the thing you want becomes bigger than anything else. Linking back to your question about having that big grandiose why, the why and the need are synonymous. If you need to go to the toilet, then it's like, why do you want to go to the toilet? It's not even a question of want. It's I need to go to the toilet. I need to take action. At rock bottom, that need is huge. The real challenge is when you don't have that need and you only have the want. How do you make the want bigger? And most of the time with goals that people are trying to achieve, we're just trying to achieve a want. We're very comfortable and settled where we are. We don't need to do anything. Like, we could be in the pursuit of becoming millionaires, but we don't need to be millionaires. We could be in the pursuit of building great, huge businesses, but we don't need to build those huge, great businesses. But we do it anyway.
I'd argue that some of the most successful people out there that do become millionaires or billionaires or really hyper incredibly successful in business or any terrain or it could be sports is almost like, it's the chip on the shoulder that does give them the need and they're going to succeed no matter what.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's an easy thing to replicate in that same degree if you don't have that same need or the same chip on the shoulder, right? That makes you want to go and do better. Like, and what we see is there's a lot of self-abandonment, self-neglect that comes as a result of that as well. If you look at hyper successful people that have gone and created that level of success at the expense of themselves or their relationships or something around them, whether it comes through addictions or some kind of drug or alcohol abuse or they burn out or they just don't have good functional relationships in their lives or whatever. I think that there must be something else that we can tap into. I'm not sure what the answer of this is, and maybe I can pass it across to you of going, if I don't have that chip on the shoulder that makes me so hyper successful, but I want to be successful, where
Why?
would you help clients tap into to help them bridge that gap?
Why do you want to be successful? Like in today's day and age, especially with the internet and social media, success is it's a word that gets thrown around, and it's almost well, I would equate it to our parents' generation needing to get married and have children.
Hmm.
It was a given. Like you didn't even question it. Nowadays, it's like, will you get married? Will you have children? Some people do, some people don't, and that's fine. It's not a need anymore. Whereas this new wave of needing to be successful. I mean, first of all, what does that mean? Because
Yeah.
that's a different like definition for that's unique to the individual. And but yeah, is it a need or is it just something that is expected? I mean, in my talk at Give It All, it was all about fulfilling the burden of potential,
Mm.
the expectations that were placed upon me as a child, and that which I then took into adulthood, and I needed to fulfill this potential because that was what was expected of me. And now, because there's a spotlight on anyone with a social media account, there's a need to show that you are winning in life, when actually that might not even make you happy. It might not even fulfill the need that you actually have. How many people have stopped and asked, what do I need in life?
Mm.
And not like, what do I need, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, although they're very appropriate. But if my goal is happiness or a good life, what do I need to have that? Because conventional success might not be it.
Mm.
You know, how often can we go to poorer countries and see people who don't have much and yet they're happy? Their needs are fulfilled. To them, they are successful. They might not be rich or have a lot of stuff or even do much, but they're happy.
Mm. Mm. One of the things that we see in coaching is usually the coach coaches that which it is that they needed the most. So, for example, a voice coach is coaching someone to reclaim their voice because their voice was deprived or suppressed when they're younger. Maybe a body image coach is coaching that because they had self-esteem problems around their body image. Somebody that coaches ADHD wasn't able to focus when in their business and they found ways to overcome that. Now they're coaching that, passing that down. I think this is a really great way to discover a sense of purpose in life and maybe a sense of redemption in some ways as well. For for myself, I really love the space of coaching around connection because I feel like I was very lonely and disconnected for such a big part of my adult life and probably even younger as well.
Yeah.
And so it brings me such great joy. How does this apply for yourself and where it is that you are as and the work that you do and the way that you articulate it?
I'll link it back to the simplicity of humans. It makes sense that coaches end up in the field that they worked on, because in the process of working on themselves, you learn about the skills, the methods, the techniques that help in that area. So for me, having this constant need to fulfill my potential, it makes sense that I would coach people in doing things that help fulfill their potential.
Mm,
But I would take it a step further. As as we're children in adolescence, we learn how to be loved. It's a constant experiment of trial and error. What do I need to do to be loved?
mm,
Who's my source of love? What do I need to do for that person to receive love from them? Now, for me, it wasn't direct, but I had built the story or the narrative that I needed to fulfill my potential in order to be loved by my mum, who was my primary caregiver. And when got to an age where I learned that that wasn't true, I was released of that burden of that story. But the habits I developed didn't change because I didn't have the awareness to reflect on that and therefore understand that I can change it. So when we talk about coaches helping people in a particular space based on what it is that they did, the thing that you are doing as a coach, I would ask, how does that link to what you feel you had to do to be loved? I knew that and this isn't even from my mum, this is actually in school. Anytime I learned something quickly and then was able to help others learn it, I was praised.
mm,
I was praised by the students I was helping, and I was praised by the teachers who were running the class. And so with that becomes this mode of being where if I help people improve, if I help people learn, if I help people develop themselves, I'll be loved.
mm,
And so why wouldn't I get into an industry where your very purpose is to help people learn, grow, improve?
mm. So you can continue
Yeah,
receiving the love that it is that you once got
yeah,
into your adult life. Has there been an element of a healing journey through that? Because one part that flags within me, and I don't know whether this is true. My question around it is, that receiving. So the way that we're conditioned when we grow up to receive love, it can often come out and again, like pretzeling ourselves in a way that we may or may not want to behave just so we can receive the love. Like as humans, as babies, as children, as adults, in order to survive, we need to receive that love. If we don't receive it, we literally die. And so that's why people do all sorts of crazy things to go and gain acceptance and receive that love and feel important and have that significance, which is a core human need.
yeah,
And we go and do all that. And a lot of the time, it's dysfunctional. It's not going to be serving in being the most healthy, fulfilled type person because it can come out as people pleasing or caretaking, or on the other end of the spectrum, narcissistic type tendencies as well. And so there is a healing journey that needs to be wrapped up within it to find out how we can still receive that love, show up in a way to receive that love that also takes care of our own needs, who it is that we are, really like intrinsically within ourselves, who it is that we want to be. What have you discovered through this process yourself?
I take a very logical approach to it. It's a process from A to B.
Hmm.
You've got A where you are and B where you want to be. So in terms of the pursuit of being loved, and again, similar to success, everyone has their own definition of what that means. For some people, it were they what's the word? They desired um, the attention of their primary caregiver or both their parents or someone. And so attention becomes the currency of love.
Mm.
So it makes sense that that person would grow up to crave, that's the word I was looking for. They crave the attention. But now the source doesn't matter.
Mm.
Just the more, the better. The more attention I get, the more I am loved and I'm achieving the goal. So depending on what your currency of love is, you will create a vehicle to get there. Creating a social media account and getting it to like 1 million followers is a vehicle to attention. And attention is that person's currency to being loved. That person didn't need to create an Instagram account. There's other ways to get attention, but that's just the way that they chose. So when we talk about this healing process, this healing journey, what that is being aware of the vehicle that you're using to achieve the goal. And then if I had to define what a healthy vehicle is, it's a vehicle that achieves the goal without doing any harm and without indirectly fulfilling a conflicting need.
Mm.
So if you haven't ticked either of those boxes, the simple solution would be self-love. People talk about if you can fully love yourself, all that vehicle becomes internal, and you don't have to search for that external process or those methods which could potentially be harmful in order to achieve that goal of being loved. But then something that people don't talk about is if you fully loved yourself, and when I say fully, I mean therefore have no need to receive any kind of love externally, it disconnects you.
Mm.
And that hurts some people.
Is it true though?
Well, you tell me, because I got a feeling that it would not sit well with you, that idea.
Well, it doesn't sit well with me. It's in conflict with my belief, and also, well, in conflict with what all the research shows as well, is that yeah, we need it's a core human need. We
Yeah.
need the love. There's no point that we can get to that we are so independent, so self-reliant on the internal love in us that we can survive just solely from that as an internal source. We still need it from others. We still need the connection. We still need the physical touch. Humans are wired to connect. We've got to this point in humanity because we've worked together. We've got the closeness within each other to co-regulate. Self-regulation in terms of own emotions is really important, but co-regulation, we need that as well. We need to develop both.
Yeah.
And all of that. I really like what it is that you're sharing. We're going, well, how can we maintain the self-love within us or maintain that while receiving love from others? And I think rather than taking that approach, what was coming up for me uh, is rather than having like horse trading, I do this for you. Like I'm gonna put my self-worth out there in hopes that you love it, and then I feel good about it.
Yeah.
But like our self-worth of who it is that we are is not out for exchange. You don't put that out on the open market and sell off your self-worth to whoever's going to give you self-love for it. I think that's a very different approach. Thinking, well, this is who it is that I am, and this is my internal world, and I'm going to protect this and still be okay with the idea that people are going to love me for who it is that I am without anything in exchange. Without anything in exchange. I'm not going to give you anything to earn your self-love. And now that would open up a whole nother exchange and going, oh, well, so what? I just demand it. I just expect it. I can just sit around and do nothing and you're going to love me. Well, that's not necessarily true either. It's through your essence and fullness and expression of self that people then fall in love with, which is a big, big change, right?
But then where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Because it's great to have enough self-love to sustain yourself. But like I said, at the extreme level, that means there's no need to give or receive.
Yeah. Well, what if we could have both?
Well, ideally,
What if it's not at the opposite ends of the spectrum?
it's the pursuit of, or the romanticization of self-love is helping people shift along that spectrum.
Mm.
be going from one end where there's a constant need to receive from the external in order to fulfill that need for love, and it's pulling people back towards that ideal middle ground. I'm just pointing out that there's the danger of going the other way, and becoming an island where it's like, I love myself, I can self-sustain, I don't need to give and I don't need to receive, because I don't need to receive. But ideally, it's like having a kitchen full of food that you can use to sustain yourself, but you can also give freely, because we talk about being loved for ourselves, not having to do anything to receive love. And if that's the case, then great. But then the question is, how freely can you give love without having any desire to receive anything back? If you can, then great. That means you're putting yourself in a position for others to do the same, even if they don't. Whereas I think it's
well, that's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
I think it's a lot more common for people to give love in hopes that they receive it back. And if they don't, then it's like a failure or sad.
Well, and that becomes then the strategy, I'll call it a strategy, or the tendency of people pleasing or caretaking.
Yeah.
And trying to fill something within ourselves that we don't already have there. But the idea from coaching, at least, is we're already full, able, complete human beings, and we just need to come back to just need to. Minimizing is this tiny little thing that we need to come back to developing all that we already have within us, or practicing it, or expressing it, or allowing it to be there.
Yeah.
All these things. So with all this being said, in terms of the work that you do and the way that you help and you coach people through, somebody listening to this is going, well, great, Phil, this is awesome. You speak my language. Apart from, and maybe as well as reaching out to you and getting your support to go through this. Whereas before doing that, what would be a great starting point that they could maybe self-diagnose, if we're going to call that, to go, oh yeah, okay, this is me. And then the initial steps that they can work through that can help them just immediately where it is that they're at from their own current self-awareness. That would be some accessible steps.
Lock yourself in a room for like an hour with a pen and paper and think about what you want.
What are the prompts that you'd suggest, like maybe 3 to 5 prompts that they could work through? Questions that ask, or maybe like if they were going to come into a coaching session with you, what kind of questions would you ask that would get them through their current levels of thinking that would allow them to open up more truth within themselves?
Start thinking about the thing that you want, and the first thing, there'll be something that pops up that in terms of the obstacle, it's like, oh, I'd really want that, but
yeah.
but I don't have enough money, but I don't have enough time, but my partner wouldn't like it. And then just flip it. Well, what if you did have enough money? What would you then have to do? Because it's not as simple as, well, if I had enough money, I'd have it. It's like, no, once you've got the money, there's got to be some kind of action that you would have to take in order to get the thing that you want. Even if it's as simple as, I want a new car, but I don't have the money. I was like, okay, well, if you did have the money, what actions would you have to take to then get the car? Well, I'd have to go to the car showroom and pick the car that I want. Like, okay, cool. So now you've got the post-obstacle action plan. Now, what's the pre-obstacle action plan? What actions need to be taken to get the money? What ways of money do you currently have? What other ways are there to get money? And then that's when you start like the whole action planning process. But it all starts with knowing that you want the new car, because I think a lot of people suffer in a quiet sense of dissatisfaction, not knowing what it is they actually want, just knowing that what they have isn't it. But in terms of procrastination, this to me it's the area of procrastination that people aren't talking about. Most people, when we think about procrastination, we think about how there's an action that needs to be taken or an action that we want to take and we're not taking it. So no, procrastination starts way before that. You can procrastinate even having the desire, because although our minds are simple, they can be very quick. And we have this thing called a subconscious where a lot of stuff is happening in the background. So what you might not realize, but being in a situation where you feel content and satisfied, and therefore you don't take action, starts where a single idea or desire enters the brain. And before you even acknowledge it, your brain has this habitual process, which is super quick. It's like a reflex. It takes that idea and goes, yeah, this would be nice. But what would we have to do to get this? We would have to take risk. We would have to put ourselves in danger. We would have to do things that we don't normally do. We would have to risk losing what we currently have. This, I don't like this. I'm going to remove the desire. So you're not procrastinating the action, you end up procrastinating the desire. But because you're not aware of that process that's happening, you go through life thinking, I don't want anything. But yeah, that's a lie. Whereas if you did admit to yourself that you do want it, then you enter the challenges of common procrastination.
And I think all those points that you just raised they're so deep within our subconscious. Sometimes they're not even in the front of mind or out on the paper or verbalized. That this process that you just shared before, I'm going, okay, well, what is it that I want? But that, okay, flip that around, and we start writing all those things out. We can look at them, and when they're on a piece of paper and you look at them, you're like, wow, that's the truth of it. That's not actually even a big deal.
Yeah.
I can go and do that, or take a small. At first, it might be seemingly overwhelming, and I think overwhelm is just another distraction process as well, or avoidance process. It's too much. It's just there are too many things to handle all at once, so I'm not going to do it. And so, well, okay, I'm sure that's probably part of your action coaching as well. Take the first step and just start actioning upon that. An example that's come up recently, people go, I'd love that life that you're living in Bali. I wish I could do it. I'm like, well, you can. Why can't you do it? Oh, because I got my job, but I got my job back home. I'm like, okay, well, what if you didn't have your job back home? What would you have to do?
Yeah.
Well, get rid of my car, sell my house. Oh, that's all too much. I can't do it. Okay, well, I've just heard but. Well, what if you sold your house or rented your house or turned it into an Airbnb that became your income stream that would then fund your life in Bali? Oh, yeah, I didn't think of all of that. Oh, maybe just start having that conversation.
Because of the fear of doing all that.
Yeah.
Like,
But you don't have to do it all at once either.
No.
You know, people go, oh, it's like as if they can't do it in a week. It's just not possible. Oh, what if you created this, okay, what if we did it over 12 months? I wouldn't take 12 months. Okay, then.
Yeah, we underestimate what we can do in a year, but we overestimate what we can do in a day.
Yeah, well, okay, make it 6 months. Is that doable? Oh, yeah. Holy shit, now it's possible. Just figure out what it is that we want, right? So before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more question. This podcast is Reconnect. It's all about reconnecting with ourselves, to reconnect with others, reconnect with this world. And I think a lot of what we spoke about here today, taking action allows us that reconnection to happen with others and with ourselves, to get really clear what's going on with the narratives and coming back to the truth so that we can take the action and build the life that it is that we want. In relation to that, is there anything else that we didn't cover today that's right there within you that you're like, yeah, this would be a helpful addition to this conversation for everyone listening?
The main thing to come away with is having it's not, I don't even know if there's a word for it, but it's like the inner safety to express to yourself what you actually want. It might be scary to imagine telling a partner or telling a friend and actually admitting it to the world, but don't let that stop you from admitting it to yourself, because it's too easy to be scared to the point of not being honest with yourself, not being able to say, actually, yeah, I do want more. I do want to change that thing. I do want to have that, be that, or do that. Because I think it's such a shame when you get to a point where you're looking back and you're like, you're far away from it now that you can look back and now it's safe to say it, because that was back then. Oh, I wish as a child I'd done that. I wish in my 20s I had more of this.
Mm.
And now you've got the excuse of time. I was in the past, and therefore I can admit it, and I'm safe, and I don't have to do anything now, but other than admit the want. And it's like, okay, well now let's fast forward. If you're in your 30s or 40s now, fast forward to your 80s
Mm.
and think like you're looking back on the age that you are now. What are you going to be saying? Oh, I wish I had what?
Mm.
But you could change that. And so instead, when you're in your 80s, you'll be looking back and saying, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's such an awesome practice. I really love that you mentioned that inner safety with ourselves. There's a lot to be said about that. And like safety is in our emotional safety within our nervous system. One of the most common ones is so many people are filled with self-judgment. I say that like going into a coaching session, I'm like, would it be okay just for like the next half an hour? It would be cool to suspend any judgment. Like, no judgment from me, but maybe from yourself. And yeah, like 80% of the people go, oh, wow, that would be a big deal. Uh, wow, really? But that self-judgment, why would we trust ourselves if we're gonna give ourselves a suggestion and we just bat it away with judgment and go, "No, that's fucking stupid. We're not gonna do that. We can't trust ourselves to do that," or whatever. It would be so hard to create change, right?
Do you find sometimes people come into coaching sessions with really small goals?
Oh, all the time. All the
And
time.
it's
Like,
like,
we
really?
ask them every time I'll ask what the biggest, so like, oh, my initial accelerator program is 3 months. It's 14 weeks, so 3.5 months. And I'll say, "What's the biggest goal you have? Like, what is your outcome for this 3 months?" Yeah, I really want it to be like, for you, absolutely life-changing.
Yeah.
So you can come away and go, "Wow, that was the most important trajectory changing catalyst of my life." That's my goal for them. Maybe it's a bit extreme, but like, it needs to be that extreme because we land on something and what they think is this massive goal. I'm looking at them, and I think it's our job as coaches, right, to see more in our clients than they can see in themselves.
Yeah.
It's a given. But I'm like, all right, that's your biggest goal. And I go, okay, if that's the biggest goal, let's fast forward what might happen in 12 months. And I just speculate what it is. I bring it forward and I feed that back to them. Should we go for this? And they're like,
Like, that's huge.
whoa, no, it's scary. I'm like, I don't always get it right, but like, we get close, but I see their physical reaction.
Yeah.
They start
Panic.
freaking out. I'm like, that did something to you. I think that's what it is. And they're like, really? And I'm like, I want to like, because I guarantee the work that we do. I don't guarantee that I'm going to change your life. I'm going to guarantee that if you follow the process, your life is going to change. Like, I'm going to drag you into, oh no, I'm going to invite you actually. That's pretty nice. I'm going to invite you into the fire where transformation is inevitable. That you can't not change. Like
Yeah.
action is going to happen, right?
And that's ultimately what our coaching is.
That's all coaching is. That's all it really can be. We can't change anyone's life. But they're like, wow. And so I'll guarantee the change will happen. And they go, wow, is that really possible? I'm like, yeah. No, okay, let's do that. And you know what's crazy? They're like, not all the time, but probably like 65, 70% of the time, they'll achieve what I speculated as a 12-month goal in about half the time.
Yeah.
6 weeks in, they've achieved it. And they're sitting there going, wow, this is so crazy. Not only did I achieve my goal, we doubled the goal and I achieved it in half the time. I'm like, yeah, so what do you want to do for the next 6 weeks? They're like, but by that time, like what has become possible, the minds have shifted. And so the next goal is like way bigger, way bigger. And I think, that's the start of personal development, isn't it? Is learning to dream bigger and seeing what's actually possible, especially if no one's ever done this work before, just realize how much they've been holding themselves back. That was me for most of my life. And once I got the taste of this, I was like, let's go, baby. We're going to do it.
That's why. So in my first book, I originally in the first draft, the first chapter was all about creating the goal, creating the outcome.
Mm.
I recognized that there was this need to work on the expansion of the mindset before you even start creating a goal. Because if you enter the process with the mindset you start with, you'll create a goal that suits that current mindset. And so there was this need to have a preemptive chapter purely around belief. What do you believe is possible? if right now you are living the life that you know is possible because you're living it. If your not necessarily dream life, but your next level of life isn't much bigger because you're basing it on your current life, then your goals are going to be really, really small.
Mm.
And so that's why I think people who, unless they've done some kind of process to be able to expand that thought process themselves, they need that external source to say, like, what would be bigger? What would be more? What would be greater? Or if, what if you extended it over 12 months? And then suddenly the possibility of that goal becomes bigger. And you're like, oh, yeah, actually, yeah, let's go for that. Even though it seems scary because it's so much bigger, so much further away.
Yeah. It's almost like an invitation of permission.
Yeah.
I feel that within myself when I do working with a business coach. I go, well, what are your goals? And they're quite small. And he did the exact same process to me as I do with my clients. I'm like, really? I'm allowed to dream that big? Like, I've never achieved that before. Like, is that even possible? And he's like, yeah, fuck yeah. With my help, that's what we do every day here. You want to do it? I'm like, yeah, okay. And then we go after it, and then you achieve it, and like it's really cool. But the other thing is, it doesn't seem like a big deal when we get there because we become the person that is capable of achieving the goal, and it's like, oh yeah, this is just normal.
Yeah, that's the
But
new normal.
I think it's really, really, really important to look back. People go, oh, don't look back. That's not the way we're going. But if we don't look back, how do we celebrate how far it is that we've come?
Yeah.
And who it is that we've become and the obstacles we've overcome. I think I love looking back and going, wow, this is the version of me that I now am, because often growth it feels like it just happens. I still feel the same as I did, I don't know, when I was 23 until I hang out with 23-year-olds and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not 23 anymore. And I think it's the same with growth too, right?
Well, it's like climbing up a mountain. If you only look at where you are, like on the mountain, then being here looks the same as being here, which looks the same as being here. The only bits that look different are the bottom and the top.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to truly experience that journey, regardless of how high or low you are, you have to look down and see the heights that you've reached, and also have an awareness of how much further there is to go. That's the experience of the journey. It's almost like that is the argument of there is such a thing as too much presence. If you're too like in the now, then you don't experience the full picture.
Just having that conversation recently about really admired the Balinese people that they live in the present moment. They're such a great demonstration of living in the present moment. But then we zoom out a little bit and go, they're not so great with consequences of just the present moment. But so we've got lots to learn from all sorts of different people from around the world and how we can apply it to our lives and what it is that our goals are and where it is that we're heading.
Yeah.
Phil, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and
Thank
your
you for having
knowledge.
me.
I'll drop all the links to yourself in the show notes as well. And I really look forward to continuing this conversation offline and maybe back in another conversation in the future.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.